At long last, this is the video that many of you have requested. I received lots of comments from viewers that Burgundy is extremely expensive and it would be very useful for me to prepare a Burgundy video. So today, I'm going to be identifying 10 of my favorite Burgundies for $50 or less. Of course, if you're talking about Burgundy, you're generally talking about Pinot Noir for the reds and Chardonnay for the whites. However, in this video, I do identify one excellent wine that's made from a different grape. If you think you know what that might be, please let me know in the comments below. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page before we begin, when you're talking about Burgundy, it's important to note that there's a 4-tier classification system. And so the lowest level, the entry level, consists of regional wines, and these will typically have on the label Bourgogne AOC. Then one level up from that would be village wines. This would have the name of a village on it, such as Gevrey-Chambertin. The next level up is Premier Cru, and then the highest level is Grand Cru. In this video, I wasn't able to identify any Grand Cru for $50 or less. However, all other categories are represented. The first top Burgundy for $50 or less is the Domaine Louis Michel Chablis Forets, which is a Premier Cru that sells for around $45 US. Of course, Chablis is in the far north of Burgundy. As such, it tends to be a little bit cooler, and the climate can be quite marginal. You're primarily dealing with Chardonnay in Chablis, and these Chardonnays tend to be medium-bodied with fruit descriptors that include green apple and lemon, and you also have some substantial acidity. There's generally no oak maturation, or at least no new oak maturation, although there are some exceptions to that. The Michel family started making Chablis way back in the 19th century, and it is still family-owned to this day. There are 40 Premier Cru parcels in Chablis. This wine comes from one of them. Specifically, the Chablis comes from 2 different parcels in the middle of Chablis, one of which has more sun exposure and is warmer, and thus contributes more ripe fruit to the wine. Both parcels have shallow soils with bedrock just below the surface, which contributes some minerality to this wine. So this is a mineral-driven Chablis that will definitely benefit from a few years of bottle age. It matures in stainless steel tanks for about 12 months before it's released. It's also a very aromatic wine, and one that I think you'll enjoy. Domaine Jean-Michel Bourgogne Rouge Les Graviers is the next top Burgundy for $50 or less. This one sells for about $47. This one is a very interesting story. The owner of this domain was a pilot in the French army. Without any prior training or education in winemaking, he moved to Burgundy and began immersing himself into the culture and began learning from top winemakers. This ultimately culminated in him purchasing some vineyards. He started out his winemaking career with about 2 hectares of vineyards way back in 1980. Now, through careful selection, he has about 14 hectares of vineyards. Interestingly, he uses 100% new French oak to make his Burgundy, which is a bit unusual, but this producer does have top fruit sources, including fruit from 2 Grand Cru sites, which is certainly very impressive. This is his entry-level wine, but 100% of the fruit for this wine comes from Chambolle. Chambolle tends to be quite fruity and aromatic, and it's certainly something that can be very elegant and a wine that I enjoy very much. This wine received a very favorable review from a top Burgundy critic recently. It's definitely an outstanding value, and one that I think you will enjoy very much for this price point. The next top Burgundy for $50 or less is another Premier Cru. So already 2 Premier Crus out of the 3 selections. Specifically, I'm talking about Domaine Jean-Jacques Girard Pernon Vire-Clesse, the Vire-Clesse, which is Premier Cru. This one sells for about $48. This family has been involved in the winemaking business in Burgundy for almost 500 years. The father of Jean-Jacques, back in the 1990s, wanted to convey his property to his sons, and he had 2 sons. But because Jean-Jacques and his brother did not see eye to eye in terms of style and production methods for their Burgundy, they ended up each taking half of the holdings, and they went their separate ways. This is an excellent, top-notch producer and one that I recommend highly. The house style tends to be fruity and aromatic with lots of elegance and finesse. This producer achieves a fresh, elegant style through use of cool fermentation. So this is another red Burgundy based on Pinot Noir. The fruit comes from a 0.42 hectare parcel that's located near Corton. The vines range in age from 30 to 85 years old. This is a consistently excellent wine year in and year out that represents a compelling value. And so I recommend this one very highly. If you're getting value from these top Burgundy picks, please go ahead and smash that like button so this gets distributed to more viewers. and please do subscribe to my channel. That really does help me a lot, and it allows me to make more videos like this one. The next of my favorite Burgundy for $50 or less is the Domaine Patelou Chablis Vendange. This one sells for right around $49. The winemaker for this property is the highly acclaimed Thomas Picot. Thomas started this winery way back in 2005 with 8 hectares that he obtained from his family. Shortly after he began making wine, he received critical acclaim for his wines, and he's been highly regarded ever since. Impressively, despite being in the far north of Burgundy in Chablis, this producer uses organic farming methods and is also biodynamic certified and has been since 2009. Certainly very impressive for Chablis. Thomas Picot picks his fruit a little bit later than most producers in Chablis. The result is a Chablis that's in a rich style. The Chardonnay vines that produce this wine are about 50 years old, so some pretty good age on these vines. Recently, these wines have started to show impressive texture due to extended lees aging and the use of large fruiters for maturation. The result is an intense mineral-driven wine, and one that I think you'll enjoy very much for about $50 or so. A red Burgundy is my next top Burgundy for $50 or less. Specifically, I'm talking about the David Moreau Santenay Layat. The 2019 vintage sells for around $46.99. Santenay is located in the southern part of the Côte d'Or, so it gets a little bit warmer than some of the other portions of Burgundy. David Moreau took over the operation of this winery back in 2009 or so after his grandfather retired. One of the first tasks that he implemented after taking over was the introduction of organic farming methods. Impressively, the fruit for this wine comes from mid-slope. This is a 1-acre vineyard that faces south and has limestone soils. Due to the aspect and the south-facing nature of this vineyard, it does not get exposure to the northern winds, and for that reason, the fruit in this vineyard is able to ripen consistently year after year. David Moreau uses a small percentage of whole cluster fermentation to make these wines. The result is a refined mineral expression of Burgundy with floral and red berry descriptors, and one that I think you'll enjoy very much. Domaine Arlot Bourgogne Rouge Roncavie is my next top Burgundy for $50 or less. This is a red Burgundy, and the 2018 vintage sells for around $47. This producer was founded in 1942 and has been gradually expanding its holdings through savvy acquisitions ever since. They now have about 15 hectares of vineyards in 19 different AOCs, including 4 plots in Grand Cru vineyards. This domain is also certified biodynamic. The fruit for this wine comes from locations in Gevrey-Chambertin. There was some controversy surrounding this classification for this wine, and many people think it should not be a Bourgogne Rouge necessarily. What happened is Joseph Arlot purchased this property back in the 1960s. Prior to the time of the acquisition, the vineyard was classified as Gevrey-Chambertin. After the acquisition, however, half of the vineyard was declassified and no longer considered a village level. For that reason, this wine is not able to be classified as a village wine and is only a Bourgogne Rouge. This is so despite the fact that a stone's throw away, you have a Grand Cru site, Griot-Chambertin, so certainly this is a wine that punches well above its weight and is one that probably is deserving of a much higher classification than it has. Gevrey-Chambertin wines tend to be a little bit more full-bodied and robust, and so especially if you like a more robust wine, this may be one that you'd want to give a try. Impressively, the vines used to produce this fruit are 60 years old. This wine is aged in oak, only 5% of which is new, and it is unfined and unfiltered. This is an outstanding wine and one that represents compelling value at this price point. The next top Burgundy for $50 or less is the Heritiers du Comte Lafon Vire-Clesse. This wine comes from the Mâconnais Domaine for highly acclaimed winemaker Dominique Lafon. This domain was founded back in 1999 and is certified biodynamic. This is a white Burgundy, so it's based on Chardonnay, and it comes from Mâconnais, which is at the southern end of Burgundy, almost to Beaujolais. As a result, this is warmer and drier than most of Burgundy. Historically, Mâconnais was regarded as an area that was relegated to the production of high-volume wines rather than interesting, highly acclaimed wines. But Dominique Lafon changed all that. He started buying up parcels with old vines that had high altitude. He then began converting them to organic farming methods. He matures these wines in large vessels of neutral oak. This particular wine is made up of a blend of village-level fruit that does not go into a single vineyard bottling. This wine does show riper fruit due to the warmer climate in Mâconnais. However, they do pick the grapes early, so the ABV percentage is only around 13% for this wine. So this is a wine that I think you'll enjoy very much, and certainly one that comes from a highly acclaimed producer. The next of my favorite Burgundies for $50 or less is the Domaine de Villaine Bouzeron Aligoté. And so earlier, if you guessed Aligoté is the other grape that we would be discussing besides Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, you are correct. The 2019 vintage of this wine sells for about $49. If you see Bouzeron on the label, the wine has to be 100% Aligoté. In 1997, Bouzeron was awarded AOC status. Aligoté is Burgundy's second white grape. Bouzeron produces highly respected Aligoté, and this is definitely the best place in Burgundy to find Aligoté. It's the only place in Burgundy where they produce their Aligoté from vines on mid-slope. In other parts of Burgundy, they used to grow their Aligoté mid-slope, but have long since relegated Aligoté to the lower, more undesirable areas. As a result, other parts of Burgundy tend to produce largely uninteresting Aligoté. And so if you're interested in finding an intriguing expression of Aligoté, definitely look for Bouzeron. This wine is a blend of fruit from 17 different parcels that are vinified separately. This wine spends a year on its lees before it's bottled. 2019 was a warmer vintage, so this one is medium to full-bodied, and even has some intriguing honey notes on it. Nevertheless, it does still have ample acidity, and it's a very interesting wine and one that I think you'll enjoy. Certainly an excellent value at this price point. The next top Burgundy for $50 or less is another white Burgundy, but this time from Chardonnay. Specifically, I'm talking about the Domaine, Forets, Puy-Fuissé. Puy-Fuissé is an appellation that's located in the southern part of Burgundy, in Mâconnais. This producer's been making wine in Mâconnais since the 1840s. This is a blend of fruit from some of their best parcels. The average age of the vines is 40 years, but some of them were planted way back in 1955. This producer achieves complexity by blending fruit from two different soil types. Specifically, about 1/3 of the fruit comes from west-facing sites with granite soils, while the remainder comes from east-facing vines that have a mixed soil type that includes limestone, marl, and some clay. About 55% of this wine is aged in stainless steel, and the remainder is matured in neutral French oak. This is a very enjoyable, mineral-driven wine with bright acidity, and one that I certainly recommend very highly at this price point. A red Burgundy is the next top Burgundy for $50 or less. Specifically, I'm talking about a wine that comes from producer Domaine Montreux-Montely. Montely is a village that's located between Meursault and Volnay. This producer was founded way back in 1835. This wine sells for about $47. The vineyard is about half of a hectare. The average age of the vines is an impressive 60 years old. The vineyard faces southeast on a steep hillside. There's very low yields for this fruit. The wine is matured for 15 months in oak barrels, only 20% of which are new. This is an elegant velvety wine with supple tannins and more of a dark fruit profile. And this is another one that I think you'll enjoy very much. If you're interested in more wine recommendations at the $50 price point, please be sure to check the links below, as I have 2 videos linked there for you to see.